In today's short video, we're going to look at the passage plan, the pilotage plan, what's included in both, and how they differ. So what's the difference between a pilotage plan and a passage plan? A passage plan is effectively a narrative of the entire journey, how you expect it to pan out. And then what you do is you check yourself against that passage plan as you proceed. And then you know where the critical points are to make decisions. You know whether you are making progress at the appropriate speed. If you're not, you can make decisions on how to speed up, or whether or not you're going to have to slow down closer to your destination because of perhaps a tidal restriction on entry into the port. So a passage plan is an entire narrative with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now, a pilotage plan is like a smaller part of your passage plan. The pilotage plan is a macro version of the exit from the port you're leaving or the entry into the port you're arriving at. And it'll have very specific information, like the passage plan, but over a smaller distance. So the two work together, and a passage plan will include pilotage plans as part of it. Now, we have actually got, and you'll be able to download these in this course, but to give you an indication of what's included in a passage plan, and don't worry, we are going to go through this in much more detail. You can see here, this is something which I've created for my students, and it's a pro forma, just to jog students' memory as to what they might consider including in a passage plan. So, again, without going through it in too much detail, at the beginning, we've got information on the vessel and also the skipper and whether there's a mate or somebody, a second person in control. There should always be somebody else that you can pass command to in the event that you're taken ill, or that in the event that perhaps you went overboard. So there should always be one other person who's designated and knows that it would be their responsibility to take charge. And then persons on board, that's pretty obvious, and that's very helpful, especially on bigger vessels where you've got several crew or crew that you don't know. However, you should have this information easily to hand near the radio, so that if you have to send a mayday, you have that information immediately to hand. So persons on board or souls on board would include everybody on board, including yourself, and make that clear. The call sign, so the call sign of the vessel that you're on. Again, in an emergency or an urgent situation like a pan, you may well be required to inform the Coast Guard of your call sign, and if you've got to hunt through documentation, it's going to make life an awful lot harder than if you can just give them the call sign off the written piece of paper. And more importantly, any crew member who is doing this for you can read this information off a bit of paper while you're dealing with, for example, a man overboard on deck. MMSI number. So anyone with VHF radio now is going to have an MMSI number. And yes, so you should have that information there, again, for the same reason. And then in terms of other information that would be useful for you, so at the standard port for the area that you're sailing in. Now, of course, there may be more than one, but in that case, perhaps you're going to start with the port that you're leaving from. And you'd have standard port, the port VHF information there, so you can glance at it quickly, and then you're going to have high water and low water times and heights. And then almanac pages used, so if you're referring to an almanac, if you have the pages used there, then not only does it mean that you can refer to the almanac if you need to clarify something, and you can do that quickly, but it also means that in the event that you are asked to provide your passage plan and proof that you did a passage plan, you can illustrate that, yes, I did, and these are the pages I referred to. And then charts used for the same reason. Weather forecast. Now, obviously, this would be the latest weather forecast, and so this would be the last bit of information to go into your passage plan. But you will already have a forecast from a few days before, and hopefully the actual weather is the same as you were expecting, and that the 24-hour forecast ahead is what you're expecting as well. And then voyage narrative. So in summary, just a voyage narrative. So that's just very basic. We're going to leave Cowes, for example, at 0900 hours on Saturday, the whatever, sail west through the Needles Channel to waypoint 1. From waypoint 1, we will pass south of St Albans Ledge, making sure we are clear of the shooting range and also clear of the overfalls before heading into Weymouth. So it will be something like that, and you might include a couple of waypoints in the narrative just to illustrate what you're going to be doing. And that's just so that everybody, when you're briefing your crew, you can brief from that narrative. And then we've got a pre-departure checklist. So you can look at this at your leisure, but as you can see, I mean, it's all fairly obvious, but easy to miss things. Fuel tanks pressed, so have you got enough fuel on board? Do you need to carry extra fuel in the way of cans, and if so, where do you stow them? Water tanks pressed, so make sure that you've got fresh, clean water on board. Make sure that you have enough water for your crew and for your passage, and do you need to get more water? Fill water cans, gas bottles filled, passports and other crew documentation in the grab bag. We'll go into that in more detail. SOLAS kit, so all the emergency kit. We'll go through all of this later on, but as you can see, there's a fairly comprehensive list of things you to do first, including safety checks, your pilotage plans, victualling, so your food and menu plans. Have you got the latest weather forecast? Are all hatches secure? Is everything stowed? And I've left a couple of extra tasks that you can write in. So that is a little pre-departure checklist for you. And then the meat of the plan itself. So the plan's going to have a list of waypoints primarily, and you are going to sail from waypoint to waypoint with a bearing, distance, and a waypoint will be at a latitude and longitude. So you set up your waypoints here, and then your bearing to and distance. Now your bearing to is not going to be the same as your course to steer at each waypoint, but in most instances you would probably have an idea of your first one, and then depending on how well you're doing against time, the course to steer is going to change anyway. So we'll talk about that in another part of this course. And then ports of refuge and the position of each approach waypoint. So what we're going to look at there is what ports of refuge do you want to run to, dependent on what the weather is doing, and then what point are you going to sail to before you start your pilotage plan. And then once you get there, you start your pilotage plan. Special hazards and notes. So this might be shipping, it might be buoyage, it might be tidal gates, it might be overfalls, it could be a wreck, it could be all sorts of different things. And those hazards, shipping lanes, for instance, and all of those hazards would go in here. And then your destination port, your ETA, which you will work out after, at the end of your plan, you should have an idea of your ETA if everything goes well. The port VHF, and then high water and low water times and heights, and then some general notes. So just general notes on what bits and pieces that, for example, into certain ports there are there's etiquette or local bylaws that you need to stick to, and you can't cross channels without radioing to the harbour master, etc. So you put all that sort of information in there. So at the bottom of this form we've got Coast Guard information. Coast Guard in the region that you're sailing in, a telephone number, and then also I would put on there a land contact for the crew, so that somebody on shore has all this information, and a telephone number. And what I would do is photograph my passage plan and then send it to that person and say, this is my passage plan, I'll ring you when we're leaving, this is our ETA, and go from there. So that is a passage plan. Now the difference between a passage plan and the pilotage plan. So as I say, the pilotage plan is a smaller part of a passage plan, and it's specific in terms of giving you bearings or headings to go from one point to the next point, and will also include things like transits, clearing bearings, all the sort of stuff that you will have done in pilotage transferred onto paper, so that when you are coming into a port at night that you don't know, you can spend your time on deck both keeping your crew happy, but also making sure that you're in the right spot, looking out for shipping, watching out for buoyage or nets or whatever the hazards might be on the way into the port that you're going to. So again, vessel information, and you'll notice here specifically on this we've got a draft and an air draft. So that's the height of the top of the mast above the water, and also our draft, so our depth from waterline to bottom of the keel. Those two, it's sensible to have that information immediately to hand, especially if you're chartering and you don't know your vessel, so that when you are coming into a port, you know how much water you've got. You can establish quickly whether or not you're going to be safe in a particular channel. And then we'll date it, we'll put the details of the port. LOA, so length overall, useful to have that information for the vessel, especially when coming into a berth. So a mariner is going to want to know your draft, and, well, you want to tell the mariner your draft and also your length overall. And if you're particularly beamy, you might want to mention that. Generally, most mariners are going to be able to accommodate you widthwise. And then we've got tidal information, so that's our high water and low water, and this is at local time. So it doesn't matter if you want to do everything in UT, but in this case I've done local time, and I've made it clear here it's local time, so that when we're underway and sailing, if a less experienced sailor comes along and looks at this, they can see, it's local time. And if they don't think about that, they're going to look at their watch, and their watch is going to be right. Okay. Relevant almanac pages again, hazards and navigational notes. So this is just on a smaller scale. This might be a rock outcrop on the entrance. It might be a nasty tidal eddy, a particular time of day, that sort of information. And also things like ferry movements. So are there ferries, and whether or not there's any particular bylaws with relation to who gives way to whom in a restricted channel, etc. And then the waypoints list. So this waypoints list is going to be over a much shorter period of time, maybe just a few miles, maybe 1 or 2 miles. And it's going to buoy hop you down the channel to the marina. So you're going to be following, on the way into port in the UK, you'd be following the green cones on the way in on your starboard side. So you'd be staying to the starboard side of the channel in most instances, and you'd be hopping from cone to cone, and we would be checking off the cones as we go past them with light config, and then a bearing a distance to the next one. We'll go through this in a lot of detail. And then here is our pilotage plan, and this was called the rolling road, which I'm going to talk you through later. Okay, so we've got the passage plan, which is the larger narrative, and then we've got the pilotage plan, and you might have several of these in your passage plan, one for departure, one for arrival at your destination port, and one for, or more than one, for ports of refuge. And if you have all this information in one place together, then if something goes wrong, or if you arrive somewhere and it's an area that you don't know, this will make life an awful lot easier, keep you calm, keep your crew calm, and frankly, make you look good. I hope you found this short video tutorial useful. If you did, please click the like button. This helps promote the video on YouTube. If you've got any of your own tips or experience you'd like to share, or you've got an idea for a video, let me know in the comments section below. And if you aren't already a subscriber, consider subscribing, and remember to click the little bell so you're notified when I release my next video. There are various links that might interest you in the description section under this video. Until next time, sail safe.